We're ready to go. We should see attendees start to join. There we go, there's two. So Roy, one more minute and then I think we can...
I'll give it a couple of seconds, about 30 seconds more, and then we'll kick off. So the participants are rising. Welcome everybody. We'll get going in a minute or so.
Hello. Yeah, I can see the attendees coming in.
Welcome everybody. We're going to start in a couple of minutes or a minute or so. Okay, let's give it another 20 seconds. That's it, it's rising. Hi, Drika, welcome. Okay, I think maybe let's get going. What do you think?
Yeah, I think we can start, Roy.
Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. Good morning to some others, and good evening to other people joining us from all over the world. It's with great pleasure I'll welcome you here today to talk about staying ahead without losing your head. I'm so excited about facilitating this tribal initiative with an extraordinary set of panelists. I welcome Liesl, Bebb-McKay, Kathy Magill, and Kerry Barendse from Tribal. I'll introduce them individually to you as the session moves through. And I'm absolutely fascinated with Tribal's business philosophy, with a concept that goes, in all aspects of our lives, things get easier when we work together. And I think it's no better time now than we all kind of need to put our heads together. By the way, Liesl, Kathy and Kerry, I really love your logo, the protea. I think it represents your African roots, even though all of you are based all over Europe. 3 women founding members, which is fantastic. You describe it as your personal tribe, the people around you, your corporate tribe, your business networks, your community tribe, how you give back. And through these tribes, your aim is to boost business effectiveness by working with teams and individuals to identify and develop winning strategies and capabilities. It's very interesting, the protea with those 3 kind of segments. So today, you're going to help us with what we can control, what we can't, how to move ahead with purpose. And it's a pleasure for ClarkHouse Human Capital to be associated with this seminar today. So to all the attendees out there, welcome again. Please feel free to ask questions through the Zoom menu. You'll see there's a little Q&A button down at the bottom. What we'll do is we'll address certain questions during parts of the session, and we will address some questions right at the end. Just for your information, this webinar also comes free with potential kid interruptions, dogs barking, people mowing lawns, and you know, dodgy Wi-Fi. We might even have the odd hardy dog call from my side of the world. So, you know, just bear with us. So it was Mike Tyson who once said, everyone has a plan until they are punched in the face. And let's be honest, I mean, most of us can honestly say we are blindsided punched by this COVID-19, and it's certainly not going to end anytime soon. So this topic couldn't have come at a better time. I mean, many business owners like myself, many of my clients, small, large, corporate entities are feeling a little bit overwhelmed now. You know, it's the uncertainty that is making leaders feel like they're losing their head. You know, we're facing this barrage of incoming stuff from social media. Do this, pivot here, lean into innovation there. If you're not building masks, you're not in business. If you're not doing this, etc. So it is quite intimidating. You know, and I think it reminds me of a quote by Peter Drucker, where he says, the greatest danger in times of turbulence is not the turbulence itself, but to act with yesterday's logic. I want to add further to that, to saying, or even worse, maybe not acting at all. You know, personally speaking, as a business owner, it has been an incredible difficult 4 weeks, you know, just trying to take in all this information. And, you know, it's going to be really, really interesting for the team to break down, you know, this new world of the world. What are the key themes? You know, how can we inspire new thinking out of these themes? How do we go back to the basics and get some tips and tools, on gaining control and keeping it. How do we lean into innovating, and how do we pivot using what we know, our secret sauce? So it's with absolute pleasure that I introduce our first speaker, Kerry Barendse. So Kerry is from a strategic brand and design background. Her career and deep love for all things brand has translated her career, now spanning 18 years, 2 continents. She's worked with business brands across multiple industries, helping them best tell their unique stories in ways that visually inspire and deeply resonate with their customers. One thing I can say about Kerry is she talks about her brand truths that describe her, and those would be things like tenacity, humor, and gumption. And for those of you who don't know what gumption means, it means resourcefulness or courage, which I think we all need. Kerry, I'm going to hand over to you now. There's a new story unfolding, and we're a part of it, but the noise out there has really blurred the storyline. What's this new story that you're seeing, and what are these trends?
Thanks for the great introduction, Roy, and welcome to all our participants today. Yes, I'm hoping my presentation can provide a little bit of inspiration for those of you who are watching it, trying to get through the COVID haze that currently exists, and grabbing at any straw you can to find that inspiration. So if I can, I'm going to crack straight ahead, and I'm going to ask you please to have a look at the next 2 slides as a lens through which I'd like you to look at the 3 themes that I've seen currently at the moment through the media, through my own social media feed, through people I have been speaking to and communities that I've been reaching out to. Again, I don't think it's anything that's hard or cast in stone. It's merely things that I think I'm seeing that are relevant in the world right now. So I'd like to start with my first slide, and this of course is the lovely PM from New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern. Jacinda really has become the shining light, an example of leadership the world I think is desperately clinging to and needing right now, both with the Christchurch crisis that happened and now this COVID crisis that's happened. She's managed to do things I think most leaders have really failed to do. She's been able to provide phenomenal direction. She's been able to give that direction meaning. And the best part of all is through direction and meaning, she's been able to envelop both of those things in high levels of empathy. And I think that for me is going to become the defining light of leadership for the world going forward. The second great leader I'd love to reference, of course, is the unmistakable Steve Jobs. And Steve Jobs had this wonderful quote to say about dots and our future. I'd like to ask you please just to all read this quote for yourself, but the underpinning thought is that at this time, at this particular juncture in our lives, we all have to have an inextricable amount of trust, hoping that wherever we find ourselves years down the line, when we do look back, these dots of our future and past connect. So whether that is faith, whether that is a belief in a specific religion that got you to the point that you did right now, we all have to have a lot of trust. I suppose that's really difficult for a lot of people right now because, of course, trust doesn't necessarily put food on the table. But what it does do, I hope, is it allows us to believe that what our governments are doing, what our leaders are doing, what our own business companies are doing at the moment, we're doing the very best we can right now to make sure that we do connect our dots going backwards. So this provides, as I said, the lens through which I'd like you to look at these 3 trends. And of course, I'm going to jump into that right now. The first trend that I've identified is something that I've called a new patriotism. And of course, this entire idea of togetherness and social cohesion. I'd like to start this trend by telling you a little story, which of course is true, about a famous cricket game that happened in 1940 between England and South Africa. I don't know how many of you are familiar with cricket, but in essence, what happened is Cliff Gladwin, who was the English batter, had to come into play with 2 wickets remaining and 12 runs required, and on the very last ball, got the winning run on a leg bye. And if you know what a leg bye is, or if you don't, I'll tell you now, it's when the ball comes off your thigh instead of coming off your bat. It still gets recognized as a dinkum hit, and of course they were able to close that last run and then succeed. Upon said fortuitous leg by hit, Cliff Gladwin turned around to the then South African captain, Dudley Norse, and said, "I told you, cometh the hour, cometh the man." And the reason why I've used this story is because it underpins this very notion that when people are pushed to the very brink of the worst situation they find themselves in, they really do rise to the occasion. And how this links back to new patriotism is how countries have risen to the occasion. I can definitely speak for my own home country, South Africa, and having a look at what Cyril Ramaphosa has done, I think his actions have been swift, decisive, provided meaning, and of course, he has been exceptionally empathetic. Now, this image, albeit jarring, I'm going to talk a little bit about pre and post-corona. I don't want you to get confused with new patriotism and this very convoluted view of nationalism that we've always had. And I think it did dominate our news streams pre-corona. Of course, the Make America Great Again statements, and people trying to find a niche place that they could place ill-placed patriotism in terms of their belief systems. I think for me, what makes new patriotism really different, it's about a group collective. It's about wanting to be better communities, and of course, better patriots, not something that serves a single-sided view of a country or a person's within that country. An extension of that theme a little bit has been, of course, what's happened with businesses. Again, I don't know about you, but my news feed in Facebook, not that that's the source of all news, but I do find it quite interesting, has been dominated with people selecting small businesses that they wanted to support during this crisis and afterwards, and this very collective real sense that we would be looking inwards first to support businesses that, of course, are local to our communities and our countries. Again, I think what this crisis has done has made us realize that whether you're a business or an individual, we definitely are all very linked together. And if one business fails, or one supplier, or one competitor of our business fails, it could mean the destruction of our very fragile ecosystem. And we've had to learn new ways of supporting each other. I found some great examples of this, none of which would be unfamiliar to you, of course. But the first one I'd like to reference is the alcohol companies, many of whom have had to pivot from the creation of their local tipples or current tipples, or those that provide income, to hand sanitizers, which has become an absolute essential to the man on the street. The second example, of course, has been the vehicle manufacturing businesses that have also had to find different ways to support the frontline staff, and of course make ventilators to make sure that the hospitals are supported. I'd like to end this theme with probably the best show of patriotism that I've seen so far. And this comes from the president of Ghana, Akufo-Addo, who so beautifully stated that, of course, we know how to put our economies back when we do come back online, and we will. But the one thing we have absolutely no idea how to do is bring people back to life. This is my second theme, and I do find this to be quite a powerful one. The reason why I found it to be so powerful is, again, it was contextualized by a wonderful read of an article in the Harvard Business Review. It was based on David Kessler's book on grief and the various stages of loss. And of course, there were some interesting observations understanding the current lockdowns that we're facing. I'm going to take you through what has been my 7-week journey, and I'm very sure you're going to find some synergies between what was yours and mine. So this was me about 10 days before the lockdown, very happily sitting in my local pub, declaring to all who would give me the ear that the virus was definitely not going to affect me, my lifestyle, and even if I got it, it was merely the common cold. This is when stuff started getting a little bit more real. And of course, the media was sending out information that they should have been and did right from the get-go, trying to get people's attention. But of course, it elicits a very strange response from people, and that is of anger. It's about the simple pleasures and your joy has been taken away because of something so inconvenient like coronavirus that's happened to have spread throughout the world. the joys of bargaining. I found myself doing this yet again at the same old local just before lockdown, telling everybody that, of course, we just need to give it a little bit of time, which in Belgium at that point was 2.5 weeks on the 13th of March. To all of a sudden, 7 weeks later, realizing that our reality was going to be fundamentally different. And in those 7 weeks of having my reality fundamentally distorted, I found myself on many days in deep lulls of sadness, trying to figure out, again, much like the rest of the world, when this was all going to end. And it was rather grim. But with like most tales of sadness, and of course, the various stages of loss and dealing with grief, we do eventually get to the point of acceptance. And this initially was David Kessler's last step in the 5 stages of grief. But what happened in this article that I was reading and what they contextualized was actually there's a 6th step to this entire process, and that is of meaning. And I think it's what for so many people, businesses, myself, have been trying to find and grapple, pull at straws to find out why this is happening and what it all means for us. What is this new world after the COVID crisis going to look like? And this for me, again, was something that was so beautiful to understand. This tiny little flap of a butterfly wing that emanated from Wuhan has had the most devastating consequences around the globe. But yet, somehow, through all of this, we will still derive meaning, and hopefully we will go back to futures that are completely different. Sorry. I think the thing that was really unbelievable and what we have seen through all our community engagements, my little community here in the backlands of Belgium, has been kindness. It really has been incredible seeing the community's outpouring of reach and love. People volunteering to work at old age homes, going into hospitals where the COVID crisis is absolutely rife, delivering iPads where they can so that people can connect with each other through hospital walls and in families' homes. It really has been phenomenal. And I think it's the best show of that human emotion that's often so lacking that we've seen in the longest time. For me, post-corona, I think the biggest things to change is going to be some of our societal foundations that are currently so very broken. You will see there's so much literature out there about universal healthcare and how, of course, education needs to be improved as well. It's really highlighted the weakest links within our society, and unfortunately, there are many. I also think the days of hyper-individuality and mass personalization are definitely going to be somewhat done with. I do think this collective of we, this outpouring of kindness and the ability to try and uplift communities is going to be a massive wave forward in terms of progressive change. Another example I saw of this was a really cool hackathon that was actually started by an Estonian by the name of Marko Ruseva. And what he did is, the idea was so clever, is he asked people from all over the globe. It didn't matter what your age was, your qualification, your stature in life. All you needed was a simple Wi-Fi connection and the ability to think about solving simple problems in 3 easy ways. How do I focus on the youth? How do I improve the economic instability that's going to happen? And how do I educate people around this COVID crisis? This happened over a period of 48 hours, and 2 of the best ideas that they spoke about during this TEDx talk was something called ShareForce One, which was taking the HoReCa industry employees that currently found themselves without jobs, so people from hotels, airlines, the general travel and trade industries, and redeployed them into areas that had job vacancies, such as cashiers and grocery packers, the logistics and delivery services of said groceries, and any essential deemed work where staff was needed. So all of a sudden, people that found themselves without jobs, a simple idea resulted in them having jobs. The other idea that was born from this was a little simple chatbot on a Polish website that was geared towards the Polish youth that understood Polish slang and could educate the youngsters around what the COVID crisis was, how to keep social distance, how not to get infected and spread corona to elderly and vulnerable people, and make sure generally that their communities were safe. Again, one man's brilliant idea resulting in awesome, the power of we thinking. This is my final theme, and it's one that probably took me the longest to get to, because I was still very much wrapped up in this idea of the Industrial Revolution, the Fourth Industrial Revolution, and this pegging of the digital us versus the human us. I think we've come to a point where we've realized that digital enablement and tech is not the silver bullet. It's not the thing that makes us better, but it is the thing that will help us and continue to help us connect. But in that connection, the second point that needs to be made is the true, deep authenticity of that connection that needs to be real. I think pre-corona, we were very happy, and I'll put my hand up as a marketeer and brand specialist, to throw out content that we thought would appeal to a certain audience type and never thought about the authenticity in it. If I can move along to one quick quote that I've seen and ask you once again to read it, it's definitely that we figured out that our digital enablement with our humanity is going to make us realize that we're not alone together, but we're together alone. We need to apply our most basic human instincts to our digital enablement to make it truly real and authentic. Again, I'd like to end this theme with a great example of this true authenticity that we saw. And I know the headline is a little bit jarring, but Chris Martin, the front man from Coldplay, decided that he wanted to give live performances from his lounge. And it inspired Lady Gaga to come together with the Global Citizen Group and put together, some of her really good friends, the Taylor Swifts, Beyoncés, and all of them, and put an incredible concert together now 2 weeks ago, specifically geared to raise money for the WHO and those on the front line. Piers Morgan was very quick to criticize this in terms of it being an inauthentic show of celebritydom that was just unwarranted. The truth of the matter is, because of the authenticity of the delivery, the most truly beautiful moments that I saw frontline workers being absolutely shattered by this crisis, and Taylor Swift being so vulnerable, singing a song she swore she'd never sing, landed up by raising $127 million for the WHO in one evening's performance. That is unbelievable and true testament to what happens when you can take digital as an enabler and authenticity in terms of what you can deliver creatively, innovatively, and authentically in in one way, is truly a show of force. So those are my themes, and I'd like to conclude, and I'd like to ask you, please, that when we do look back, thinking about all these things that are currently rushing through our minds, I wish you all the ability to make sure that we can connect our dots looking backwards and flourish.
Thank you, Kerry. That was fantastic. There are a few questions from my side, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold those towards the end to try and link it, all the stuff in. But I really liked the power of we, the authenticity coming out, the pure vulnerability. And I think that has got some serious questions for businesses around their brand and brand positioning, moving away from the toxicity of celebrityism and, that kind of stuff. Also loved the Steve Jobs quote: you can connect the dots looking forward, you can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust being the word there, that all the dots somehow connect in the future. And I suppose if we speak of trust, we have to look at the components of trust, which are things like credibility, reliability, intimacy, but maybe also control. I mean, if I can control something, I understand what the outcome will be, and then I can trust that outcome. And I want to bring Catherine Magill in here. Catherine, please come on. I want to introduce Catherine to you. She's a CASA. She's an expert in tax. She's got very, very strong analytical skills. She's worked for investment banks in London. She's also worked alongside, the big four in Hong Kong doing due diligence, leverage buyouts, private equity. She's someone who understands risk. She's worked, prior to moving to Croatia, she's worked at Standard Bank for many years. Catherine, maybe bring us into this aspect around control and how this fits into these themes coming out, but now we need to control, what's in our world at the moment. That we say, focus what's in your boat, don't focus what's outside your boat. Take us through the control aspect.
Thanks, Roy. And Kerry too. As Kerry described, what a change in the landscape of our lives as we knew it just a mere 4 months ago. And when I think back to New Year's Eve, on the brink of a new decade, there were a lot of jokes flying around about having 2020 vision and what did the new year hold for us and seeing what it held. And I guess no one in their wildest dreams could have foreseen what was to unfold within a mere matter of weeks. And I guess what we all needed was, in fact, 2020 hindsight. So here we all are, trying to cope as best we can in the current situation, adapting to new ways of working, exercising, learning, communicating, shopping, socializing, you name it. And as Roy mentioned, there's much beyond our control. And I feel that we can waste energy on this. And so our primary aim today is to offer some practical help and tools to take back that which we can control. Now, the good news is that there is definitely opportunity in chaos. And it is at times like this that people will improvise and innovate. While the fluidity of the current crisis obviously presents challenges in itself, we do hope that today our discussions will ignite some more critical and longer-term thinking and provide some motivation and inspiration in what sometimes appear to be dark days. It's certainly a time to hope for the best, but nevertheless be prepared for the worst. So at the risk of stating the obvious, every business, big or small, is exposed to risk, be it internal or external, that can directly or indirectly result in loss to the company. Small businesses generally are at greater risk due to a weaker capital background and less investment in risk management infrastructure due to the limitation of resources and budget. So during an unprecedented time like this, with large-scale loss of life and severe human suffering globally, we have found ourselves in a major economic crisis with a halt in production in affected countries around the globe, lockdowns in place, collapse in consumption and confidence, oil prices reaching negative levels, and the list is endless. So the unthinkable has transpired. Almost every risk type has been triggered simultaneously, placing business continuity in question. So of no use to look back and think about what we could have done to mitigate these risks. Individuals and companies needed to act immediately to prioritize risks and establish a most to least critical importance ranking. Indeed, there are many sectors which simply don't have the capacity to think beyond survival right now. And the first wave of crisis response should have been to critically assess financial stability risk. As I mentioned, many SMEs have limited resources, and with the existing obstacles in accessing capital, it really does translate to a far more restricted period over which they can survive versus larger firms. So looking at financial stability risk, there are 3 factors on which we should focus, and they are your financial position, external factors, and internal factors, all of which are inextricably linked. So if we look at financial position, this is literally taking your balance sheet and breaking it down item by item. This will allow you to assess the obvious, assess your cash flow on hand, your commitments and your obligations, differentiate between long-term and short-term, assess repayment terms and see where these can be negotiated out in order to alleviate cash flow stress at the moment. You also need to assess salary payments that are coming up, rental payments, mortgage bonds, rates, etc. Inventory on hand is a useful item to assess because this could potentially translate into a short-term revenue stream. And this will give you an overall picture of your working capital on hand and working capital requirements. Next are the external factors at play, and an assessment of their impact on the supply, on both supply and demand, should be performed. On the supply side, capacity utilization has ceased completely for many due to lockdowns, and supply chains have been interrupted. And on the other side of the coin, demand has dried up. There's been a sudden loss of revenue due to a loss of consumer or customer income, due to lockdown restrictions, fear of contagion, and heightened uncertainty around where to from here. As I mentioned, they're inextricably linked, and unfortunately, this compounds the impact on internal factors, with production and operations being impossible in many cases due to the interruption in supply chain, and also the regulations in place which are simply prohibiting production during this time. And last but by no means least, the impact on employees. For thousands, a deadly blow has been dealt by an inability to get to work, an inability to fulfill a job for which there is no longer a demand, and an inability by employers to simply pay salaries. So overall, unfortunately, the outcome of such an assessment is likely to not paint a particularly rosy picture for many, but certainly knee-jerk reactions at this time are not going to be helpful. And we really believe it's time to go back to basics, to take a deep breath, digest the information, and then formulate an action plan which will stop the company bleeding unnecessary expenditure and halt the rapid escalation of costs. Assess and research your relevant country-specific financial support options, which may provide some short-term relief to your business. And at all times, we encourage you to act responsibly and redirect any available resources to customer and employee welfare and well-being. At the end of the day, it's these stakeholders who are at the center of any business. And it is essential that strategic thinking be employed as to how your business can emerge from this crisis with its doors still open or ready to reopen, and to operate in a more resilient and deliberate manner. And key to this will be emerging with your reputation intact. As we've all felt many times, fear and anxiety, it's normal during such a crisis, but it is organizations that speak and act with humanity which will better connect their message to those that matter. And now if we look ahead, while we are experiencing this massive pressure on all our business lines and on our systems simultaneously, we should be asking ourselves, what lessons can we learn? In terms of your right now resilience, how did it actually go for your company? How did you handle the crisis? Now is a great time to look at the challenges which you have experienced around your systems and your processes, and to learn lessons from both yourself and from your staff. Do you need to start innovating faster the next time to reach your target market more effectively? Did your supply chain and your communication tools work this time? And if not, how do you plan to change that for the next crisis? And yes, we're all barely managing to keep our head above water in the current crisis in which we find ourselves, and we certainly don't want to think about the next crisis. But the reality of the situation is that there will be one. So merely focusing on survival right now is what many of us have had to do. But through doing that, we may potentially have taken our eye off other risks which may be emerging. And it is vital that such risks be critically assessed and brainstormed, because they are going to come somewhere down the line. They might not be in the current form, but they will emerge at some stage. So you need to be thinking now about what this means for your organization. Environmentally, economically, technically, politically, what are the risks that you could potentially be facing? I recently came across an African proverb which really resonated with me and is particularly relevant. It says, "Tomorrow belongs to the people who prepare for it today." Thanks, Roy.
Thanks, Catherine. That was great. I've got a quick question for you. So if we put liquidity, working capital requirements aside, so what would be the most important item which business should be focusing their efforts on? I mean, if taking that liquidity and capital requirements aside, what would you, in your expertise, say would be the most important thing to focus on?
I would definitely say that employee and customer welfare are critical at this time. For many employees, alternative ways of work have been available, but the reality of the situation is that there are thousands of people who their jobs actually require them to be physically present. And that has simply been impossible due to various restrictions and other limitations. And so their jobs are simply on the line. Liesl and I have been consulting with a client in the hospitality industry during this crisis around the challenges of being able to keep staff on, make staff payments when simply there is zero revenue coming in. And I think what became very evident very early on was how key these employees are to the business, and how prior to the crisis, the business was partly so successful due to these employees and due to their personalized service. Customers always commented on how valuable they were, etc. And so I really think that while your employees don't form part of your liquidity or your working capital requirements calculation, they're an asset in themselves to your company. And it is vital that at this time, they be looked after. As I mentioned, you need to emerge from this with your reputation intact. And the way that you have treated your employees and you've reached out to your customers, etc., is going to be a very key factor in all of this. Another point to note around employees is that there's a lot of literature out there that actually making people redundant now will end up being more expensive at the end of the day. When you reopen your doors for business, you're going to have to incur additional costs in rehiring staff. Rather try and negotiate pay cuts or something that's going to ease cash flow now, but then when you reopen, you've got to rehire, you've got to retrain, there's going to be wasted time. And I'm sure most businesses, when they are able to reopen, will want to hit the ground running.
I heard a horror story about an electric scooter company that fired 430 employees over a 30-second pre-recorded Zoom call, which is definitely not the way to go. But before we get on to Liesl, I just want to kind of recommend, given control and the talk about control, this is a book that I'm very fond of. It's called Extreme Ownership, How Navy SEALs Lead and Win. And really what it is, it's about a concept called prioritize and execute, which kind of adds on to what you were saying, Catherine. And, talks about even the greatest of battlefield leaders cannot handle an array of challenges simultaneously. And I think as all leaders, we're getting hit with so many different challenges every day. And they talk about a simple plan around evaluate the highest priority problem, lay out in simple, clear and concise terms the highest priority effort for your team, develop and determine a solution, seek input from key leaders and from the team where possible. Catherine, it talks to the staff perspective, and a solution focusing all efforts to solve that one priority and that first one, and then repeat that. So highly recommend that book. I'm going to turn to you, Liesl. It's an absolute pleasure to introduce you to the audience. You describe yourself as a dynamic agent for change. You're an innovator, a leader, a strategist for passion and people and culture and the creation of new opportunities. You worked at the Foundry, which is the digital and disruption division of R&B for many years. You were part of R&B a long time ago. And I think it's your whole concept is around opening hearts and minds to new ways of thinking. It's an absolute pleasure to bring you in here. But I think, where do we start in this chaos? I mean, so we've got the new trends, we've got the what you control. So where do we start? I mean, where do I start from? Take it away.
Thanks, Roy. Yeah, I guess it is, with all the noise, a little bit difficult to figure out how do I even look to the future or think about innovating where there's just so much noise and so much to panic about. But we'll try today to give you a little bit of inspiration. And I guess it is important to take control. And as Kath said, in the work that we do, often that's a great place to start, because when you feel like things are in control, you start to be able to look to the future. But it's important to realize that we can't shrink ourselves to greatness. I mean, there really are books that have been written about this. Controlling costs is important, but it's not going to take you forward. It's not a strategy for moving ahead. So maybe today we'll get into some of that. And I think the most important thing to remember is that the experts, the consultants, the advisors, us in Tribal, none of us have the answers. None of us know better than you. You guys that are in the business know better about your business. No one knows better than you do. You know your clients, you know the way your business works better than any expert or advice. So that's where I want to go today, not to a whole bunch of answers, but maybe to some questions that will help you rethink about things you already know in your businesses, because you guys know better than anyone else how things work for you. So the answers probably exist with you, and you just need the time to explore, time to just think about it. And maybe that's the gift of COVID, that we're all getting some time to think about things from a different perspective. So let's start with the humans, because in all solutions in our leadership journeys, we really are better with the answers starting in the human space. And it is a time for communicating more and differently, and really putting a spotlight on the people in our value chain. And maybe if we just start with our clients. So when it comes to clients, what are some questions to think about, right? So we need to get talking, obviously, to our clients, but maybe not talking in a way that we would traditionally be. So talking about our services or talking about our products. Maybe this is a time to ask some different questions, and maybe to have some different conversations, and maybe just to wallow a little bit in empathy, and maybe have a little bit of a different experience with our clients and reach out with a bit of vulnerability. So having a conversation around just, hey, how's it going? Or, hey, you know what, we're in an absolute world of pain, because most of us are. How's it going for you? What can we offer you? Because we're all in this pain together. And this talks to Kerry's point about the we. How do we really take that theme and apply it to the way we interact with our clients? How do we bring that into the conversation and into our brand value? What do our clients need from us today? And maybe there's a way that we can actually help each other practically. And this is quite an interesting thing, because when we start to look at what this means for the future, when we interact like this and we ask some different questions, it may mean that the relationship changes. And maybe through that changed relationship, and we've had examples of this in some other conversations, whereby changing the relationship and having this human conversation, new products start to emerge and new ideas start to emerge that we wouldn't have thought about before if we didn't have this conversation. So a question is, how does the relationship that we have with our clients today translate into a completely different relationship because of how we interacted during this crisis? I read a quote by an American financier from the 1900s, Bernard Baruch, who said, "We did not all come over in the same ship, but we're all in the same boat." And that's kind of how it is for us now. Our ships are different sizes, but we all do feel the same. We're all suffering somehow. And that shared humanity is really something that we can share together, and that we can take forward into the way that we're doing our work. And then maybe just some questions that we can be asking around our teams. Kath did say that these are the most important people, and of course our most important humans are in our teams. And really, what kind of workforce will they be coming out of this? We've read about the impact this will have on their mental health, on our collective social mental health, but there is a lot more to consider when we're communicating with our teams. And I think the most important one is the story. Because as humans, we love a bit of a story. We live by stories. I mean, this whole lockdown is one long story that's unfolding. But what's the story that you're telling your team? Because if you're not telling them your COVID response story, and you're not making it compelling and honest and transparent, and I know it's difficult, but make it inspiring, then they're going to be making up their own story of how this is going to all play out. And that story you won't hear, because as leaders, we don't hear the stories that are in our team. So we won't hear the story. And I can guarantee that the story they're making up, it doesn't have an inspiring ending. So it's really important to ask the question right now, what is the story we're telling our team? Is it terrifying or is it inspiring? And does it make our teams more accountable? Because inspired teams are accountable. And if your team is accountable, they'll be behind you, and they'll be quite a powerful force in supporting you through whatever the solution is to the situation you find yourself in now. The next important question to ask our teams is your internal social contract working? Now, this is something we all have in our teams. In our usual way of work, we have a social contract. We all rock up in a specific way at work. We behave in a certain way when we're in the office, and we do things the way we do when we're in the office. But guess what? We're not in the office, and that's all changed. And I know that in your head, your expectations are different. But has this conversation been had? We saw one big corporate come out with a note to their employees saying they are banning meetings between 12 and 2 because they know that this is a very important time for school kind of maybe ending, homeschooling and lunch with kids. And so they're just not allowing meetings during that time. And that's them altering their social contracts very actively and very engagingly with their employees. And so this is a time to think about, does your social contract need changing? And not only having a conversation around how the social contract needs changing, but then again, the guidelines. So are your expectations different? We could be saying, you know what, my expectations are different. I know it's back to school this week, just chill a bit. We don't need you to be full on. Or our expectations might be quite the opposite with, guys, come on, we actually need to really go harder than we were before because things are really under pressure for this week. So that social contract is a question. Another question to think about is the guidance. What guidance do your employees need? Because we're giving just tons and tons of guidance on how to work from home, but are we giving guidance about information we have as business owners that maybe they don't? So how does the market crashing affect their pension? These are things that are going to be keeping them up at night, and we might have information that we could be providing. So another question there to ask is, are there things we can be giving to our teams that will help them to really not be battling with things that are keeping them up at night? Okay, Roy, you're on mute.
Always helps if you can unmute. My mouth's faster than my other mouth. I've got a great question from the audience. So Henry, thank you so much. Liesl, and I'll direct this to you, and if any of the other members want to jump in. Are businesses doing enough to stress test their human balance sheet, employees as competitive advantage, sustainability factor, and assets that need protection? I think that is an absolutely brilliant question. I'll leave it to you, and then I'll happily add my 2 cents worth.
Yeah, and I think this is exactly it. That's the question we need to be asking. I mean, Kath said, give yourself a performance score for as you come out of this crisis. And that's one of the scores we need to be saying, like, are we really taking this asset seriously? And what are we doing about making sure that we're going to emerge with this asset intact? Because we all said in the beginning, our employees are our biggest asset, but what are we doing to make sure that they really are? And a lot, again, comes back to that story. What are the words that we're saying to them? How are we behaving in a way that makes them feel really confident in where we're going?
Okay, brilliant. There are a few other questions. Sasha, I've seen your question. I'm going to bring that in at the end. Just from a timing perspective, we're going to carry on. Liesl, you talked about social contracts, and I'm seeing the death of capitalism and maybe an emergence of a better, more humane capitalism, which I think is really good. And just to reiterate, earlier Kerry talked around vulnerability, and for some of you that don't know, I'm a massive Brené Brown fan. If none of you know who Brené Brown, or if you don't know who Brené Brown is, she's an international author. She's written books called Daring Greatly. She's explored the concept of vulnerability. And I love this quote from her. It says, vulnerability is the birthplace of innovation, creativity, and change. We all need a bit of creativity and change right now, but it sounds so easy. I mean, let's be honest. Everyone's just telling you to innovate. I feel like I need to be building a rocket ship out of a vacuum cleaner while I'm at home because I'm not innovating fast enough or pivoting fast enough. But let's just get to the bottom line, Liesl. I mean, innovation. How do we stop procrastinating, and how do we think about the future now? How do we go about revisiting our strategies in a way that can, work in these hard times, these pressurized times?
Thanks, Roy. Yeah, we committed to trying to give you some tips and tools around innovation. And I guess when we are stressed, we do need to have a very scientific approach to things. So maybe these next few questions will help you really journey down the innovation life cycle, because innovation is a science, just like anything else. And that may sound counterintuitive. Many people will think innovation is something that happens by accident, or something that's a bit fluffy, or something that's creative. But in fact, it's really just the scientific method in play. You have a hypothesis, you determine your apparatus or the tools that you have at hand, you formulate a method, you experiment, and you revise. And this is exactly what you hear, failing fast. Failing fast is really just scientific method and practice and innovation. So here's a few questions that hopefully will help you dive into that innovation practice for yourself. Questions, again, that I'll say only you and your business have the answers to. But let's go through some of them. So all innovation really starts with the client. We've said that already. So that's the first question we need to ask. What do our clients need from us? Or more specifically, what is the need in our clients that our business serves? Interestingly, people's needs, they actually change very seldom, and that's true for our clients too. The important thing we need to identify as business owners is what is it we do for our clients? What is it we really, really do? So to be clear, a product, the thing you give them, that is not what they need. That is the delivery mechanism. But what they need is very important in trying to determine the innovation. We need to get a very good answer to what's the point of us anyway for our clients? What do they really, really need from us? And if you're battling to answer this, then a little trick is to ask yourself 5 whys. Why do our clients need us? Well, because we help them solve problems. Really? I'm sure they can solve their own problems. Why? Because we've got great engineers. Really? Lots of people have great engineers. Why you? And keep on going. 5 whys. Eventually, after 5 whys, you'll get a lot closer to the truth. And what our clients' needs are generally track Maslow's hierarchy. So they may be physiological or safety-based, or they may meet a need for love or belonging or esteem, or they may even be quite high up and be self-actualization based, depending on what your business is. But each business meets a human need in a very specific way. It's just not something we often think about when we frame the way our business is. So maybe that's something to think about. What is it that our clients need? Once we have an idea of what our clients need, we can ask the next important question, which is, how are we delivering that need right now through our products and services? And this is the magical part, because the delivery mechanism is where the innovation happens. It's through this delivery mechanism that changes all the time that we are able to innovate. And when I say it changes all the time, this is where innovation happens. So in some cases, you may see an exponential shift in the delivery mechanism and the way clients' needs are met. But in most cases, it's kind of organic and it's incremental, and will grow and change over time as new things become available to us. And so once we understand how we're delivering things to our clients, we can ask the final 2 questions in the process. The third question really is the diary of dissatisfaction. And this is the important question of what is completely irritating about the way we meet our clients' needs currently. What in the way we give them products and services just doesn't work for them right now? What do they wish was better? And to get innovation right, we have to ask this question of our clients. What do you wish was better? Their answers will take us closer to the truth. They'll really come up with the innovation for you, but they will be able to tell you what doesn't work for them, what they wish was better, and how we can start to meet their needs where they are right now. The last question we have to answer is, what tools and methods are available to us right now that we can start applying to these needs? So how is the tech changed? And in the time we're in now, where digital has just come way to the forefront of everything we're doing, we are going to see new technological advances, but also how has the world changed? And Kerry started to answer some of that for you. So some themes we're seeing, what are people looking for in products, is going to be around we, and it's going to be around community, and it's going to be around local is lekker, and it is going to be around this new kind of patriotism, and of course this balance between humanity and digital. So if we take all of that, plus the diary of dissatisfaction, what our clients need is, and we determine how we deliver that, well, that is the simple, very simple process for innovation in a nutshell. But sounds really simple, but it isn't. So why aren't we innovating? If it's such a simple process and we just have 4 questions to ask, why is that we are not just innovating? And to Roy's question, simple just isn't easy. So if you had to say the simple way to lose the excess weight we're all gaining during COVID, the simple answer is stop eating. But that is not easy because we're cooking so much, because we're all locked in. And it's exactly this with innovation. The answer is simple. Ask yourself 4 questions, have a little meeting with yourself, figure it out. And you should get to a better way of wrapping a delivery mechanism for your client to meet their needs. But we can't, because it's not easy. And it's not easy because of this one theme that comes out no matter where you are, or who you are, and that is there's just so much at stake. There's just so much at stake. What if? What if we spend a ton of money and it doesn't work? What if we do this new thing and we have to get rid of a whole lot of people and then hire a whole lot of new ones and our clients don't like it? What if I fail and I don't get my bonus? What if it doesn't work and we get fined? What if our clients hate it? What if? There's so much at stake. And that's why in small businesses, they're able to pivot. Like Kerry said, the word of the day, they can shift and pivot quickly because they have nothing at stake. But as our businesses grow and mature, it just becomes too scary to innovate, and so we don't. And even with small businesses, eventually they grow up and stop pivoting as well, because there is just so much at stake.
Sorry, I have to jump in here. I do apologize for interrupting. So a lot of what ifs. I mean, basically what you're saying is that we're just doomed, you know, no one's going to innovate. There's just too much. Is that what you're saying? I mean, how are we going to come out of this delighting our clients, you know, if there's so much at stake? I mean, this is the key component for me. So I'd love you to elaborate on that. I'm aware that there are a lot of questions coming through. We will get to those at the end, but I'm sorry to interrupt you there.
Yeah, Roy, we're all doomed. It's doom and gloom. It's COVID lockdown. Time to really get in the doom. No, we're not all doomed, and it is very simple. But the one way to really start to turn the volume down on what's at stake is to come back to basics. And we've called this come back to basics for a reason. In our personal leadership practice in Tribal, when we're working with individuals and they're stuck, we bring up this concept of coming as you are, or bringing your authentic you, rocking your superpower to your leadership journey. And it really is the same in our strategy practice. So we have to focus on these incredibly important questions again, about what makes us great. How are we different as a business? And maybe even where did it all begin? Because if we can feel safe in who we are as a business, then that what's at stake volume goes right down for us. That fear goes right down. And here Brené Brown's writings are also super important for us. So it is really important for us to figure out how we go back to our amazingness as a business. In some innovation practices, folks may tell you to try and apply your favorite innovator to the problem. And it is a useful exercise, although it is totally overdone. It really is useful, and I would encourage you to do it anyway. How would Google get out of this? How would Airbnb get out of this? How would Zoom? How would Trello? Whoever your favorite innovator is. And why that's useful is it allows you to step out of your context and look at your business from a different angle. So a very useful practice. Another useful innovation practice is to look at what your competition is doing. And every single strategy book you ever read will tell you not to do this. But I think it's super useful to look at what your competition is doing for one primary reason. And that is, it starts to highlight what that diary of dissatisfaction is. Because if you see the ideas competition is coming up with, often it points to what that diary of dissatisfaction is, and we can zoom in on that. The real magic practice, though, is when we ask the question, how would we do this? Not our competition or Google. How would we solve this? How would we solve this when we're at our best? How can we solve this in a way that's so unique for our clients by doing what we're best at? And going back to what our clients love about us. Go do that. That's how you turn the volume down on what's at stake. And I want to end with this little piece of wisdom from my mom, the thing she drummed into us from our childhood. And that is, if it feels too difficult, you're doing it wrong. And that really applies to everything. It applies to opening a jar, or putting together furniture, or assessing a relationship, or in this case, how we are choosing to get ourselves out of this crisis, if that's what you're choosing to do. And again, there's a parallel between our leadership practice and the strategy practice for us in Tribal. So in the leadership practice, again, where leaders are stuck and they're not having fun at work and it feels too difficult and they feel like they've hit a wall, we go back to their unique amazingness, their strength, their superpower. And we ask them to try and solve a problem or tackle their job in a way that they would do it their way, run their own race. And interestingly, when they do that, first of all, they have more fun. And second of all, it just feels easy. And it's the same here in strategy. If we use how Google and Facebook and Airbnb do things, it may feel very, very difficult. But when we apply how we do things, it starts to feel easy and fun, and that's where we'll find the real innovation. I hope that's been useful. I hope those questions will really get you thinking about your business in all new ways.
Awesome. I'm going to ask if all the panel can come back on. I've got one or two quick questions. They are coming through. So, Catherine, I've got a question for you, and I am aware of time. We're supposed to be ending around 5. We can go over a few minutes. Here's a question. How many PCPs really plan for the black swan or the global pandemic? How many PCPs? I'm not quite sure what PCPs are. You might know, you're a financial person.
Business continuity plan, I'm presuming, is what they're meaning. And in all honesty, I'm sure there were very few. Pandemics certainly are not impossible. However, the probability of pandemics is pretty small. This century, this century alone, we've had quite a few. We've had SARS, we've had MERS, Ebola, but certainly none of them became a global pandemic like we find ourselves in today. So, as I said, I imagine there are very few BCPs which have really taken into account a global pandemic. BCPs generally foresee infrastructure not being available, and they don't recognize that people may not be available. And today we've got our infrastructure available. Computer systems are working, telecommunications is working, etc., provided you've got some key individuals ensuring it's all going on for your company. However, it's the people who simply cannot be present. So it's certainly going to be a time to reassess BCPs and really take a closer look, ensuring that they address all the different risks that are going to arise we've seen from this global pandemic.
Before you run away, one more quick question. So someone in the audience asked, and they agree with you, you said that ripping a business apart to cost save may cost more later, particularly severancing staff, severance pay. Is there any literature supporting this? Do you know of anything that you've read that you can guide the audience to?
I will need to go back and have a look. I've read so many articles, in all honesty, over the last while. I can't remember exactly which one pointed to that or which ones pointed to that. And I'll go and have a look and we can share that information then.
Awesome. And then another quick question is, as an employee, so I'm not management, I'm not leadership, how can I promote and encourage positivity in the workplace? And do I also have a responsibility in motivating my teams? I'm going to quickly jump in there. I've done a lot of work with one of the most sold authors in the world around culture, which includes employee culture, customer culture. And he talks about cultural heroes, which are everyday people who work in the office that need to step up and do this kind of positivity. So to answer the question, absolutely, if it's in you, do it. And I think there can be more of it being done. So I'd certainly encourage that. I'm aware of time and we probably have to start wrapping up in a few minutes. I think, one of the questions I want to pose to the audience, and maybe Kerry, you can come in now, from a brand perspective, this authenticity of brand and purpose. So I'll start with you, Kerry. Maybe you can just give me some comments on being a purpose-driven business around brand and authenticity. How does that play out for businesses? And maybe I can just get some opinion from Liesl after that, and then we'll wrap up.
Thanks, Roy. Look, I think, to be quite honest, it's been the theme through this entire presentation. Excuse the headsets, by the way. My Mac audio doesn't seem to be so great, so that's the reason. I think you've just got to stick to your brand's secret sauce. And that really is what is going to keep you aligned to what's authentic and what's real and what's true. So people will sniff out opportunistic brands at this very particular point in time, brands that take advantage, brands who increase prices at the grocery stores because they know they're an essential service and nobody can go anywhere else. So again, in a very simplified form, it's just about keeping true to you as a brand. What made you magical before the crisis will make you magical after the crisis, and keep on working on that authenticity in terms of how you deliver messages. in your most authentic brand way. It's really as simple as that.
Liesl, anything you want to comment on purpose for businesses going forward?
Yeah, I guess I think this crisis is really given us a chance to rethink what our purpose is. And we've been speaking about this fourth industrial revolution for such a long time. And I've never really believed that it was happening. In fact, I don't believe it ever did happen. I think it's happening right now. Like today, we are in a revolution. It's got all the aspects of revolution tied in. What we need to be thinking is, how do we come out of this revolution with the purpose that we had in the beginning of our businesses still intact in a very authentic way, but also in a way that's serving our clients and our humanity in a way that makes sense. Because, I mean, to the question around employee, how do I increase happiness as an employee, or how do I help the vibe and culture? People want to work in a place that has purpose, and after this, even more. And so that's up to us as leaders, but it's also up to us in the business areas to be contributing ideas. And I guess that's where employees can step up and go, hey, you know what? I've got this amazing thing that I think we could be doing. And I did say that all the answers do reside in our teams. And that doesn't mean just the leadership. The answers reside everywhere in the team. It's the people on the front line. It's the people building the products as well. They're seeing things that clients need, and they can be inspiring one another, and also just coming up with new purpose in our brands. That's, again, to Kerry's point, very authentic, and sticking with these themes. I think when I first heard those three themes, I was just so inspired. I had so many ideas coming through my head, because it starts to make sense when you start applying it to authentic delivery.
Awesome. So I'm conscious of time. We've run over, and I'm sure people have to go. What I'm going to encourage is the contact details for Tribal were put up there. I don't know if they can come up again quickly. And please take down those details if you want to make contact with any of us to further answer questions. I'm sure everybody would be glad to do so. I just want to thank Kerry and Catherine and Liesl. I thought your words were well chosen and succinct and to the point, and very helpful, specifically for me as a business owner, and I'm sure to clients, that I can pass this on. Lastly, I just want to end off by saying something quite simple. It's something I use, and I quote it to myself a lot. It says, in the end, it'll all be okay. And if it's not okay, it is not the end. And in the words of Winston Churchill, success is not final and failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. So everyone, thank you for your time. Be courageous out there. Have a good evening.
Thanks, y'all.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers. Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.
Bye.